programs coordinator. Oh, you can't hear me? Normally that's not a problem. Okay. For those of you who don't know what we do, PEN is an international organization. There are 150 national centres. Their work is coordinated by the PEN Secretariat in London. We break down our work into three main areas. We celebrate literature, we defend freedom of expression, and in Canada we help writers who've been exiled to settle here. Before we begin tonight, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional keepers of the land, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee. And please, I've done my best to get those pronunciations right. And any other unrecorded and unacknowledged nations that have taken care of the land. I completely lost my train of thought because I was worrying about pronunciation. Before we get rolling, I would like you to pay attention to the empty chair that is on my right. At every event that we have, PEN asks that a chair be kept empty for a writer that cannot join us because they're being detained, they've been arrested or detained for exercising their right to freedom of expression peacefully. We do this to remind the people that support us and come to our events of the peril that hundreds of writers around the world face. One of them is in the room with us tonight, a Bangladeshi writer who came here under threat of death. The person in that chair tonight is a blogger from Azerbaijan called Rashad Ramazanov. On the 9th of May 2013, he was arrested on a trumped-up charge of possessing cocaine. 6 months later, he was tried and sentenced to 9 years in jail. At least 6 other bloggers have been persecuted by the Azerbaijani government in the same way, and they are serving similarly long sentences. PEN International believes that these sentences are completely baseless and politically motivated, and they have repeatedly called for these writers to be immediately and unconditionally released. If you would like to support our advocacy on behalf of Rashad, you can sign a petition at the end of this event. I urge you to do that, and also if you are interested, to join our advocacy program where you can write directly to writers like him in prison. He is very fortunate because he has our most effective advocate currently, someone who has managed to get him out of solitary confinement, to bring his case in front of the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, and to get no fewer than 56 birthday cards sent to him this year. So it can make a huge difference. And this is what engagement with a group like ours looks like. So please, think about it. Tonight we're gathering in the Lillian Smith branch of the Toronto Public Library. For those of you who know a little bit about her, she's an utterly fascinating person. She was the first professionally certified librarian in the British Empire, children's librarian. She had a 40-year career that began in 1912. At the end of it, she had established children's reading programs in 16 branch libraries, 30 schools, 2 settlement houses. She became, over the course of her career, a sort of expert, an acknowledged expert on the developmental uses of children's literature, the role it could play in developing a child's moral imagination, for want of a better word. And in 1957, 5 years after she had retired, she wrote a book that became quite well known. It's called The Unreluctant Years. It's a wonderful phrase and should be reused at every opportunity to describe children. And she talked about the sorts of narratives you put in front of a child and the role this played in engaging them with the world. At the end of that book, she has a little, it's called an envoy in her original. And I will try to quote from memory. She says, even though we're in an age of or near universal literacy and books are produced very cheaply and in large numbers, it is still possible for a child to pass from infancy to maturity without an encounter with a book that will satisfy him in his search for experiencing pleasure, that will offer him reality in the place of a shadow of reality. Now these were words she took very seriously. She also, another famous part of her outlook was that a librarian was someone who was there to deliver the right book to the right child at the right time. She organized story hours for young children. She had reading groups for older children. She had debates. And so I think it's a perfect piece of synchronicity that we are here tonight to celebrate the work of someone who has insisted that the public sphere in Toronto operates in reality rather than the shadow of reality, especially when that public sphere is trying to address problematic subjects like racial profiling, like police brutality. Desmond Cole, in his writing and activism, has a knack for focusing on subjects that have either been overlooked or actively marginalized by the mainstream media, or de-emphasized, perhaps a better word. He is most commonly associated with a relentless critique of the carding program that was used an astonishing 1.2 million times in 3 years, primarily against communities of color. He has been persistent in raising the very inconvenient question of why are the police databases still active long after the violence that supposedly undergirded their creation has waned or vanished entirely? What is being done with this information on tens of thousands of innocent people? What leverage does it present to the people who own it? Why does the program persist, albeit in a slightly modified form? These are terribly annoying and inconvenient questions for anyone in authority. But I think for me, as an immigrant myself, the part of Desmond's, I hesitate to call it a career. I think that's probably an insult to an activist. But the part of his working life that makes me pay attention is his advocacy for the appalling lack of justice in the case of Defonte Miller. For those of you who don't know, I can't imagine there is anyone left, but he was subjected to a savage beating by an off-duty policeman in December 2016, the policeman and his brother. And Desmond again has been worrying away at the question of how has it taken the police board the better part of a year to come around to addressing this? Why did the Durham and Toronto police not refer this to the Special Investigations Unit? What is missing in the mechanism here? Now, some of these matters are before the court, and it's far be it for me to comment on them any further. But I would observe this. Groups like PEN, and my job in particular, I focus on circumstances like this all over the world. And we never hesitate to label it for what it is, which is corruption, nepotism, and impunity. And I think what makes Desmond such a challenging figure for people who don't like him, and they are legion, is that he dares to use words like these and about a city that we all love and wish to be different. He's a constant reminder that our existence here may not be as far off those situations as we would like it to be. I think those are excellent qualifications for the Filkow Award. So I would now like to invite Brian Borzkowski to formally present it to Desmond. Thank you.
I have the check here, which I know is what you really want. But before I give it to you, thank you so much for having me. And this is my third year doing this. I really appreciate you letting me kind of say a few words here. My wife's not here. My wife Lainey is not here. Unfortunately, she can't be here, but she also sends her congratulations. So the award was established 3 years ago in memory of my father-in-law, the late Ken Filkow. He was a passionate lawyer, really was a true champion of human rights, and he was an excellent Zeta and father as well. Ken's 48-year legal career included a distinguished stewardship at the Manitoba Human Rights Commission and a lifelong defense of freedom of expression. He was also an active member of the Canadian Issues Committee at PEN Canada. Former PEN Canada President Philip Slayton and his wife Cynthia Wine created the award to pay tribute to individuals whose actions demonstrate personal courage in freeing information and ideas from restraint or interference. The artist and environmental activist Frankie James won the inaugural award. She used Freedom of Information Access requests for more than a year to unearth documents which showed that the federal government had deliberately withdrawn funding from a European tour of her visual essay on climate change. Last year, the award went to Rayhan Abir, a Bangladeshi blogger who immigrated to Canada after several of his colleagues were murdered by religious fanatics. Despite facing death threats routinely, Rayhan continues to promote secular thought and human rights advocacy from Canada. When people like these defend the public interest, democracy thrives. Their principled resistance to injustice and impunity creates an open society for the rest of us. Without them, we would learn to settle for the world as it is, instead of striving for something better. There is a quality even meaner than outright ugliness or disorder, writes Jane Jacobs in The Death and Life of Great American Cities. It is the dishonest mask of pretended order achieved by ignoring or suppressing the real order that is struggling to exist and to be served. During the last year, no public figure in Canada has done more than Desmond Cole to draw our attention to this underlying order, or to expose the facade of those who have tried to suppress it. And my father-in-law, Ken, would be very proud at this moment that you're getting this award. So please join me in congratulating the winner of this year's Ken Filkow Prize, Desmond Cole.
Thank you. Brian, thank you very, very much for those kind words. And I do hope, because this award is named after your father-in-law, that I can continue to move in the spirit that would honor his legacy and honor this award that is named after him. So thank you very, very much for being here and for presenting me with this check. Thank you. Thank you to PEN Canada for your work in Canada and around the world. Thank you to the Toronto Public Libraries. You can't see it, but I'm wearing a shirt tonight that says Library Warrior.
Yes.
Which was given to me by some rowdy library union people. The library union people are crazy, and I just want to say that. I meet a lot of librarians because I do a lot of talks in public libraries, which is like, I actually feel like I'm on a streak now where the last 5 or 6 talks that I've done, including I just came back from Halifax, and these are all talks in public libraries. And they're so important, and I find that librarians are exactly the stereotype that you think they are when you meet them, and then they get angry about a union issue and they are not that anymore. They're very serious, and I want to respect the work of the Toronto Public Library Network, and thank you guys for all the excellent ongoing work that you do in the communities. So I just want to be brief so that I can get to this conversation with Jael, who I've only met tonight for the first time, and we've been looking very much forward to having a conversation like this. But before that, the first thing I'd like to say is that for me, the tremendous honor of receiving this award this evening is an honor that I have to situate in my experiences on this planet as a Black person. I want to say that first and foremost. And that is because the year that I was born, 1982, was the year that we got our Charter of Rights and Freedoms in this country, and with it, a new regime about the idea of rights in Canada, including our right to freedom of expression as it's written in the Charter. And the reason I have to relate this to my blackness, as I do nearly all of my work, is because to this day, 35 years after that document was created and became law, black people still don't have the right to express ourselves in this country. We really don't. That law has an asterisk beside it if you're black. And I say that because of things like carding that was brought up before. I say that for 1,000 reasons that have to do with being black, whether it means being surveilled when you're going to the store to buy food, whether it means the workers in the Ontario Public Service, many of them black women specifically, not just any black people, black women who are being targeted in their workplaces when they say, you know, we talk a lot about diversity, but maybe we should have some different hiring initiatives, for example. There's a woman by the name of Arlene Davis and another woman by the name of Hentros Nelson, both of whom have been fighting the Ontario government because they said things like this at their job, and they were suspended and their pay was taken from them. So they don't have freedom of expression in this country. That's a ludicrous punishment for somebody whose opinion you don't agree with at work. But this is not an accident that it keeps happening to black women on the job, that they're being policed for having an opinion. This is how our children get treated in school when, back in the days of Mike Harris, they brought in the so-called Safe Schools Act. Any legislation that has the word safe in front of it is probably going to try and kill people. This is what I've learned. But we had something called the Safe Schools Act under Mike Harris. And one of the reasons that you could be suspended under this legislation was something called opposition to authority. And this was how they got the black children out of our schools. This is how they got us suspended and how they got us expelled. Because you don't have to hit anybody. You don't have to really do anything. You can look at a teacher in a way that they don't appreciate as a black person, and then they can say, opposition to authority, you're out. And all manner of our children were kicked out of school because of this, and so they don't have the right to express themselves or even just to be, okay? But then, what's really interesting about that is that the conservatives leave, and the government that we've had for the last 15 years, the Liberal Party, comes in. And the Liberals say this is madness. We can't have these high rates of students getting suspended and getting expelled. We've got to bring it down. So they actually do that in the coming years, over the late, mid to late 2000, and then early, this decade. The rates start coming down, and so we see that less kids are being suspended and expelled. But before the Liberals came into office, when it was Mike Harris, black kids were getting suspended at a rate of 3-to-1 to white kids, and today it's still 3-to-1, even though the overall numbers have all gone down. So our kids can't be in our school system learning and getting an education that will allow them to express themselves in ways that are beneficial to them and to their communities, because they're being kicked out of school, suspended, expelled, just for being black students with a mind and with an opinion, and sometimes with an attitude, which we're always supposed to apologize for, but, well, y'all know me. I don't do that. These are the reasons why, for me, I situate this work in blackness first, because that's how I have to go around the world, and a lot of the work that I do ends up being with black people who are experiencing a lot of the same things that I'm writing about and talking about and thinking about. And so this award is very much for the black people of the city of Toronto and of this country. I do this work with and for my community, and I love my community, so I want to say that. When I accepted this award, well, I guess I'm accepting it now, but when they told me that I was going to get to accept this award tonight, I tweeted my gratitude and my thanks. I didn't know this was coming, by the way, so it was a very big surprise to me. And of course, the thing that I had brought up is no longer here, which is what I was going to read from. But let me see if I can do it from memory anyway. When I told everybody I was receiving this award, I said that I wanted to also dedicate this to the indigenous peoples of this land who specifically are doing the same kind of work that I do to speak out, but who are not necessarily being recognized for their courage, and who are not being recognized as peoples whose freedom of expression is also being routinely denied in this country. So I had several folks that I had listed, and I think I can remember most of them, and I'm going to apologize. And I'm going to say too that there are so many more individuals and groups than I could ever name here tonight, and I want to hold all of them even though I can't single everybody out. But when I think of this, I think about people in the way of the Kinder Morgan pipeline project in British Columbia, who are willing to sacrifice themselves. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Tiny House Warriors project, where indigenous peoples are literally building little forts to say, this is our territory and you will not come through here. They are expressing themselves in this country, and they are literally putting their lives at risk from the RCMP, from corporations who want to get in there and will use violent means with security forces in order to push them out of the way. They don't have the same right to freedom of expression that's guaranteed in that charter document. And I want us to recognize the courage of folks like that, the courage of people in Treaty 8, the courage of people who stopped that construction at Site C Dam temporarily because they were saying that this is going to contaminate the waters of Labrador for generations, and we can't accept that from happening. I want to acknowledge the courage of the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters in Standing Rock, who, this was really one of the most incredible acts of resistance I've ever seen in my life. And they brought the dogs on the Dakota Access Pipeline protesters like they did to black people in the 60s in the United States. They brought the dogs so that the dogs could come and bite and maim people. And the world watched, and there was no reaction. Obama was in office, our beautiful Obama that everybody wants to praise. He did nothing. He literally did nothing. He turned his back on indigenous peoples who were protecting everyone's water and resources. So I give it up to people like this. I give it up to people in the Haudenosaunee Confederacy near Caledonia who continue to make blockades and roadblocks and who are facing, again, death threats and all kinds of violence from the community around them for daring to resist on their own land. People in Halifax who demanded that the statue of Cornwallis be removed from the public square because Cornwallis demanded the extermination of Mi'kmaq people. And there's a lot of revisionist history going on around that statue and about him, the founder of Halifax, saying that he didn't do those things when we know he did. And we insist on wanting to have a statue of Cornwallis. And even when we agree that the statue should be taken down, the government says, yeah, well, let's keep it in storage. Because who knows, maybe one day we'll want to honor this murderer again. Maybe y'all will have forgotten. Right? So I honor groups like this. I honor I Don't Know More. I honor all the indigenous peoples across Turtle Island who continue to resist by using their voices and whose lives are really targeted and threatened by their own governments just because they want to have an expression in this country. I salute them, and this prize is very much with them in solidarity. I also want to say really briefly that we have to be careful because there is something that's happening in our country right now where people, most of them white men, are trying to say that they actually are the vanguards, the protectors of freedom of expression in Canada. They're not. Particularly the people who keep making this claim. They are not. And rather than name them, you all know who most of them are, what I actually want to do is I want to say, how do you know whether somebody is really standing up out here for freedom of expression? And the way that I think you know are two things. Number one, who is it that they're defending? Because if they're defending only themselves, and they're a white dude, who's saying my freedom of expression is in peril, probably not worth your time. But the other thing is, what do they say when Indigenous people get attacked by the police for speaking or standing or singing or protesting? What do they say, those freedom of expression gurus? What do they say besides nothing? This is how we know they're fake. When Black Lives Matter Toronto goes in front of the Toronto Police Headquarters, and the first day that they're there, the police come out in riot gear and they kick and they punch and they gas people. What do these white men who value so much freedom of expression, what do they say? Nothing. Or if they do speak, they say that they brought it on themselves, those rowdy protesters. These people are not our friends. They're not friends of freedom of expression. They're not friends of the black community, I don't think. And the worst thing about them is how much of our time that they take up. So I'm done with them, but I want everybody to remember that they don't get to co-opt what we're talking about this evening. It's not theirs. The Toronto Star, I should thank the Toronto Star because I wouldn't actually be here if it wasn't for them. Their act of giving me an ultimatum last year after I engaged in a protest, I know was part of the reason for the inspiration of this award. I got escorted out of a police services board meeting by 4 armed officers in April of last year.
Shame.
And that happened because I was pointing out that you say carding is over, and let me pause there for a second. Carding is not over. Do you guys hear what I'm saying? Carding is not over. If you couldn't take the police's word before, you can't take it now. The police are telling you that they've stopped carding so that you will stop watching them. That's all. That's all. But do you really, really believe that now when a police officer sees a young 17-year-old black person in the street, that they read them their rights? Do you actually believe? That defeats the whole idea of policing. Because the idea of policing in this country is that we're supposed to fear that person. We're supposed to cower before that person. That person is supposed to keep us regulated and in line. Don't think it's not happening anymore. There wouldn't be a police system if it wasn't designed to do things like carding. But carding continues. And I was escorted out because I dared to say, how can you keep the personal information of ours that you've collected over all this time? If you say that this practice is over, you have to get rid of it. And that still, to this day, has not happened. But to go beyond carding, to think about the situations that black people are experiencing in this country right now. Between 2005 and 2015, the black federal prison population in this country increased by 70%. 70. You don't hear that, but it's happening. And it's our family that this is happening to. The apprehension of children under the child welfare services in this country. We know about the 60s scoop now. We know about the residential school system in this country. We should know by now. What we don't know is that in this city where about 8% of the children are black, 40% of the new child welfare cases in Toronto are apprehensions of black children. 40. These are not accidents, these are not mistakes. And so it's not just about carding, it's not just about police and men, it is about our children. It is about the women in our communities. It's about trans and queer and gender non-conforming people in our communities who are actually targeted in a way by police and by security that is unparalleled to anything that I would go through. People's experiences being black and having different intersections are different. So it's not just about what you always necessarily hear or see in the news. And this is why we have to continue speaking out. I just want to mention Defonte Miller before I sit down, because I went to court last week, and Defonte is in pretrial, and the two thugs that attacked him are there in the courtroom. They sit with their families, they go out into the hallway during breaks and they laugh and they joke and they have a great time. I'm not allowed to tell you what happened in the room because there's a publication ban at this current time, but I can tell you that I met that young man and that I got to shake his hand. And Defonte Miller has gone through so much just to be able to be where he's at right now. But the police services board that I was arrested at in August now, fully arrested, 6 police officers to come and pull me out of that room because that board wouldn't say anything about Defonte. Well, they still haven't. And I want to ask you to use your voices this evening. I want you to go home this evening, and I want you to write a letter to the mayor of this city, John Tory. The mayor who refuses to do anything for a young man who was attacked by a police officer. The police officer was allowed to go back to work, everybody, after he did that. And they knew he did it, and they gave him his gun and his badge back and said, go on ahead. And this man wants me to wait for a so they have a report that they say that they're waiting for, and that's why they can't say anything. They've already failed this young man, and they won't do what we've asked them to do, just like they haven't done it on carding. So you're going to get scared about what I'm probably about to say now, but this is what's required of us when we talk about expressing ourselves. I need you to write to the mayor of the city of Toronto and tell him to resign from the board. You need to tell him that he won't do the job that's necessary to keep us safe, so he needs to get out of the way so that somebody who will do that job, who's willing to stand up for us, can go there and do the right thing. Yay. So, we talk about courage. This is not about courage or fearlessness. I am not fearless. I'm scared all the time when I do my job. I'm scared when I speak out about topics that I know are going to make people angry or uncomfortable or upset or scared themselves. But none of this is a performance for you to consume. I am a member of your community and I need you. I'm not here to do something that no one else in this room can do. And in fact, if you don't do it, I'm going to be back here getting another award in 10 or 15 years, and I'm going to be a little more gray and a little more frustrated, and I'm going to be telling you the same things that I'm telling you tonight. And I love all you guys, but I don't want to do that again. So, as you see me raise my voice, I encourage you to raise yours, and I want to thank you all again. Thank you to Penn Canada, thank you to the public libraries, thank you, Brian, thank you so much for this wonderful honor. Thank you.
Well, all of these grades were earned by the human rights struggles that I've been through, I can assure you. We are now going to move to the conversation part of the evening. Jael Richardson will be the